Okay, we're going to talk about the rules. There's many, many rules. And in sociology, a lot of times we refer to rules as norms. And so let's start digging in to all of this because some of our norms in society have a lot to do with gender. So, first, just kind of going through a few terms, the idea of social construction, because I think you saw with stereotypes as we went through the continuum and did all of that, that so much of this is constructed that it changes over time and it's kind of built on us sharing the same perceptions. And then we learn how we're supposed to act, right? And so socialization in general is the way that we learn the various things that are expected, required. I don't know what the word is, right? Of us in, as you can see in the definition, in relation to our position or group or society. Well, gender is kind of one of like the idea of gender is one of those groups. So if you think about the fact that we go back to the binary and the fact that we act like there's only two genders when that's not accurate. And so, but think about also anybody who doesn't fit into the binary, how we kind of don't necessarily always, as an entire society, um, respect or understand maybe the socialization that can take place. We kind of call it into question in not very curious or kind, empathetic ways. And so, thinking about where do we learn? This is a moment to be reflective. Again, one of those critical thinking terms. Where did you get the, kind of rules and regulations kind of stuff that you follow because cultural norms can come into this in relation to gender, age and stage, right? So depending on how old you are right now and the times that we're living in, the things that we consume as far as media and everything else. So thinking about just our overall socialization. So I mentioned norms. Norms are, to me, with sociology, whenever we talk about something like, oh, that's weird, oh, that's not normal, that gets real cringy because that's, what might be peculiar to one person is not to another, and it's pretty judgmental. But norms are the things that we expect in life, and it's the usual, typical, standard stuff. Um, my favorite part of this list is the last one, unwritten rules. We don't get a manual on how to act. Um, think about, we're going to talk about agents of socialization in relation to gender, but think about maybe the stereotypes. I mean, we fall into some of them, we don't. Which one of them, if you went back to that list, we're going to look at this. Some of them are rules, right? Some of them are rules that you actually, it depends on how you buy into them or how well do you do them or what your thoughts are on them because we in relation to gender have some expectations for each other. We end up putting expectations on ourselves. Think about when we discussed beauty, like some of the expectations that we put on ourselves, that when we stand back we're like, well, wait a second, where did that come from? The other thing about norms is a lot of times you don't always realize you're following them until somebody breaks them. So, what I will do in an introduction to sociology class is, as the teacher, think about how a teacher acts, right? We're standing in front of the room, we're talking, we're running the class. Well, what I go do and to kind of mess with everybody is I go and sit down and I do nothing. I don't bring anything with me. I go sit in a desk, I do nothing. And I sit there and I sit there. And if a student asks me if I'm okay, I say yes. And then I go back to sitting there. And now I've made the room even weirder. And so I don't stop, and it's hard. This is so hard to do, but I don't stop until a student goes, what are you doing? Is this for class? Like they really call me on it because they're also breaking a norm then. Because yeah, you might say to like your sibling or your friend, like, oh my gosh, why are you being so weird? But you're not going to call a teacher on being peculiar, right? No. And so think about so many times you don't really realize something's a norm until somebody breaks it and you have that like uncomfortable feeling. Somebody who's standing too close to you and you're not going to be like, don't stand so close to me if you don't know them, right? Again, you might say that to like a friend or a family member kind of thing, but you're going to just kind of like try to step back, but them not noticing, right? But that feeling again that you get is like, well, this isn't right. What ends up happening with norms is that we get rewarded for following them and punished for breaking them. So think about in relation to gender. you can get rewarded for following like beauty norms and things like that. You kind of get punished for not following them in some ways because like society's gonna, I guess, be judgmental. We talked about this with beauty though. Like it's kind of arbitrary and we don't necessarily know what other people are thinking. And we kind of think what we think other people are thinking is like not necessarily we're coming up with it. And so think about like the rewards and punishments. Um, I would argue in relation to norms. And if let's put this in the context of the gender binary again, and individuals who don't necessarily fit into the binary because we expect that kind of heteronormative behavior that you fit in to the norms of two choices in relation to bodies about gender. And so I would say that one of the primary punishments when people don't adhere to norms, gender or otherwise, is kind of people don't interact with you. It's kind of alienation, right? If you're a person whose gender identity is one who's trans, like non-binary, gender fluid, something along those lines. And you got to think, we visually try to categorize people quickly. That moment that we try to be, I would imagine, I would hope the vast majority of us are trying to be polite, but I think a lot of times there would be hesitancy because you wouldn't want to misgender somebody, right? And so things like that, that's not a punishment in that sense, but the result of not adhering to the arbitrary norms set by society at any given moment, I would say is a lot of times that you lose out on people being willing to traverse norms and have meaningful interactions, the respectful, kind, curious interactions. So think about like catch yourself. What are some of the norms in relation to your gendered performance? What are the ones that you're like, okay, yeah, I feel comfortable, I feel good about this. But what are the ones that you would want to kind of call into question? Or what are other gender norms that kind of swirl around you that you don't buy into, right? But you see other people totally buying into it. And again, not a matter of judgment, but just what's going on around us. So often with gender, we can kind of take it for granted and not really dig in and look. So take a minute, dig in, look. Okay, I mentioned a little bit of this before, but I'm coming back to it more time. These are the ways, these agents of socialization, these are the ways that we learn our roles in society. We learn the norms, we learn the gender norms. So our family. Family is interesting because if I'm going to say that norms are unwritten rules, family is the one place where like parents are especially in relation to gender, you're going to get a lot of messaging and it's not going to be unwritten, it's going to be said to you. Boys are tough, don't cry. Oh, girls are sweet, and the way that kind of families treat gender creates the socialization of gender in our society, right? Peer groups, especially at different ages and stages, right? My husband's a junior high teacher, so when I go to see him at his junior high, because he's, coaching a game after school or something, oh man, junior high, right? Like if you think about peer groups and those, 12, 13 years old, 14, 15 as you head into high school, like the way that your peer groups can shape your ideas of norms and your ideas of gender. School, religion, those also are going to kind of have, in addition to norms, they're going to have like rules, right? Your workplace can have various norms or gendered norms. And then when I say mass media, I mean, is there any media left? There's, I guess, some streaming TV shows and all kinds of social media. It's not like, oh, look at magazines. Those are pretty much look at the newspaper. Um, but thinking about what you consume. What are the norms of the favorite things, the people that you like to follow? How are they demonstrating gender? Are they possibly people that are challenging various gender norms? So again, thinking about the fact that we can have stereotypes and everything in our society, but it kind of turns a little bit serious. And I will leave you with this, and this is not a happy note to leave you on. But as we think about gender roles and we think about people traversing the binary and challenging the binary, that can be really dangerous. And people have been hurt, people have been killed because of gendered performance. It's hard for me to say. You can hopefully hear it in my voice, but also think about this too. As we haven't had as much gendered freedom as we do even in this moment, who knows what the future holds? People have hurt and people have taken their own lives because they don't feel that they belong in society. And so, on both sides of that are excruciating heartbreak, rather, heart wrenching. And so, there's certainly moments in this class, and by all means, let's have them, where gender can be lighthearted and analysis of looking at, why we do what we do. But like, let's really, really take a moment to think about the fact that sometimes, unfortunately, in frightening ways, it can get really serious.